name's Jonette Kuhnau. I'm on the consultant team working on this project, specifically working on some of the traffic and parking analysis. So to give you some context for all the ideas and recommendations that you see on the wall, I just want to go a little bit through the analysis and kind of what led us to what you're seeing tonight. One of the things that we looked at as part of our background information is looking at how the number of visitors to the park each year has grown. And so what you're looking at is Met Council data, and these are essentially estimates of the number of visitors to the regional park per year. A couple of things I just want to point out real quickly. In 2005, there was a little bit over 2 million visitors per year. There was a change in how the Met Council calculated the number of visitors per year that happened in 2008. So that is partially responsible for the jump that you see there, but only partially responsible. We know there was a significant increase during that time. But so you see in 2009, there's a little bit over 3 million visitors per year to the regional park. And then we looked more closely at the number of visitors per day to the zoo and conservatory. And the reason we specifically looked at the zoo and conservatory is because they have very good data available on a daily basis, whereas the rest of the park, there's no good way to count all those people on a really frequent basis. So we looked at those attendance estimates and started to see things fall into a couple of categories. You can see what's on the left side of the chart is the number of days per year, and then along the bottom is attendance ranges to the zoo and conservatory. So what we saw was that this range of about 8,000 to 12,000 visitors is most of the weekdays during the summer or a bad weather weekend, something like that. Then you have this range of what looked like about 30 days a year, where you have 12 to 18,000 visitors. And that 30 days is basically every summer weekend. So that's a pretty frequent event during the summer. And then there were a few days that were in that very, very high peak, that 18 to 25,000. And that was like Mother's Day or holidays or just a really busy weekend. And that was a really small number of days. And what we saw was that 2005 is this darkest number, or this darkest bar that you see here, and 2009 is the lighter bar. So what we saw was that in that jump from 2 million to 3 million visitors a year, it's not the busiest days. We still seem to have sort of a maximum number of people that are ever going to be here on a given day. That didn't really seem to change that much, but what we saw was that the number of days that are in that 10 to 12,000 and 12 to 15,000, the number of days that have those average or summer peak days, those really went up. And so the number of days where you do have congestion or you do have parking in the neighborhood or you have those types of issues, the number of times a year that happens goes up, even if the number of people there on any given day, there's still kind of a ceiling for that. So that's kind of what we found. Talk a little bit about the data collection we did and how that relates to those attendance numbers we just talked about. There are about 2,188 spaces in the park today, and we just counted those, I think, in May. In 1981, there was 2,139 spaces, so there actually has not been that much of a total change, but there has been changes in where those spaces are located, how convenient they might be to where people want to go. We looked at a 5-minute walk within the zoo conservatory in Town. 5 minutes is kind of what people consider to be convenient. It's a comfortable walking distance for them. Obviously, there's a number of competing uses for those 547 spaces because obviously some of those people could be going to the picnic area. So those people could be going to the pool when it's open. There's a number of uses. Today, the Como Shuttle operates out of the lot on Como Avenue. That lot is owned by the State Fair. There's about 450 spaces there today. And we know from the study that the city of St. Paul did last year that there's anywhere from 100 to 400 vehicles that are estimated to be park users that are parking in the neighborhood during various days of the summer. So that's kind of what parking is out
Excuse me, I
there.
have a question about that. Is the 100 to 400 a subset of the 547?
It is not. Sorry, I should clarify that. The 2,188 includes, actually I will go to the next one. It includes everything that's on this map, and this map is also over there and on the website. It's on-street parking only within the park and parking lots only within the park. So that 547 and that 2,188 does not include any parking in the neighborhood, only within the park.
And then the neighborhood spaces, were they on both sides of the park or one side of the park?
It was the permanent parking. That number came from the permanent parking study that the city did last summer.
Okay, so one side of the park, the west side.
Right, the west side, they had petitioned for permanent
Okay,
parking.
there's some data missing from the other side of the park.
Right, that was the data that was available.
Okay.
So, this is just a map that summarizes the parking supply that we collected this year. The orange is our parking lots, the green kind of bars are on-street parking, and the blue is permit parking for staff and volunteers. In June, we went out and we counted the number of cars in all those parking spaces that you just saw. We counted the number of cars in all those spaces both on a weekday and on a Saturday to really see how the parking is being used and what the patterns are. So I'll just run through this really quickly. We start at 9 in the morning and we ended at basically 7:30 at night, and we counted the number of cars every hour and a half. And then we also looked at how, for some of the lots, we looked at how long people stay to try and get an estimate of how frequently the parking is turning over. So this is 9 o'clock on a Thursday. This was June 24th, I believe. And at 9 o'clock in the morning, the green is basically empty or close to empty. The orange and red are full or close to full. More than 50% occupied. So at 9 o'clock on a weekday, staff and volunteer parking is relatively full. Most of the rest of it is relatively unused. At 10:30, with the zoo and conservatory opening at 10, you can see how right away you see that those red areas are basically close to full. And those are the areas that we also found are within that 5-minute walk. So I'll just flip through these. This is noon, 1:30, 3, 4:30. So you can see the red areas are starting to contract back towards the center. And then at 6, not much parking any longer. And then at 7:30, there was an event going on at the pavilion, and there were sports leagues. So you can see those areas then become full. But during most of the days, they were relatively used. So we did a similar exercise on the weekend. And on this particular Saturday, there was a charity walk or run going on around the lake, so you can see the pavilion had significant parking. And then again, right away at 10:30, the parking right around the zoo and conservatory is basically full, and essentially stayed that way until close to 6 o'clock. This is 4:30, and then this is 6 o'clock. Relatively full, and then there were some wedding receptions going on at the pavilion that night, so those show up again as relatively full. And if you noticed, the parking areas around McMurray, other than during those league events, were relatively unused. The golf course was maybe 50% used. Some of the parking by the lake was relatively unused. So, like I mentioned, the parking within that 5-minute walk area was basically full virtually all day, both on the weekday and on the weekend. The maximum number number of vehicles that we counted at any one time was at 130 on Saturday, and the number we counted was 1,502, which represents about 70% of the almost 2,200 spaces. That might be surprising to some people, but really what that says is that, again, what we had already heard, the parking isn't where people want to go, so some of those spaces just aren't used. The other thing we saw was that the average vehicles per space per day was about 3.5. So there's a fairly good turnover during the hours that we were collecting data. And then there's a lot of information on this graph. Again, this is one that's on the website if you want to look at this a little more closely. But a couple things that I want to point out here. Again, the attendance that we talked about a little bit earlier is on the bottom, and estimated parking is on the side. And the red bar represents if everybody drove their car and nobody used the shuttle, how much parking would you have to accommodate all those visitors? So in this sort of average summer peak, which we're defining as basically average summer weekend, you can see the parking demands are, this is close to 1,500 spaces, and we have 547 spaces within that 5-minute walk. So one thing that tells us is it's not feasible to build if everybody drove their car and nobody rode the shuttle, it's not feasible to build parking to accommodate every one of those people driving. So then the next bar down, in the blue one, is we know that existing today, there's about 8% that either walk, bike, or take the bus to the park, and there's about 5% of people using the shuttle, sometimes a little bit more on busy weekends. So that kind of shows you, okay, that drops that demand down a little bit, but once we get over about 8,000 attendants, either people are going to park outside that 5-minute walk, or they're going to park in the neighborhood, or you start having, or people are going to circulate around when people are parking. So you start to see some of those issues. Then the next bar down, the green one, we looked at what would be reasonable goals for usage of, or walking, biking, or taking transit to the park, as well as what would be reasonable goals to increase shuttle usage. So we looked at increasing walk, bike, transit by 10%, so more than double, and then doubling the shuttle to about 10% usage. And that is the green bar. And still in this area, we're still looking at about anywhere from 300 to 500 spaces deficit in that 5-minute walk area. So there still is a shortage of parking where people really want it to be. And then finally, the purple bar assumes the 18% walk, bike, transit, but then it also is based on 25% shuttle usage. And the reason we picked that number is because we know that today about 25% of people that go to the state fair arrive on some type of bus. Obviously that's a major regional event, and they're getting about 25%. So that really is a level that is unlikely that would be reached on a regular basis at the park. So that also kind of provides a bench point. Even with 25% shuttle usage at 15,000 visitors, you don't have enough parking within that 5-minute walk. So really what all this told us was that not only is it not feasible to just build more parking to solve all our issues, it probably also isn't realistic to think that just from shuttle, bike, walk, transit, that's going to solve all the issues. There has to be some combination of both of those things to really make it work. So that's kind of where we